All right, welcome guys, episode 2 of the Raw, Honest, Real podcast. My little disclaimer, anything I share during my podcast is purely my experience. It's the things I've learned along the way through different subjects that I'll go through. And so anything you take from this is your responsibility to research, to put into play what works for you. This is not me giving you advice, this is me sharing my story. And the idea behind sharing a story is that for a lot of my growth, it came from other people sharing their experience, and some of those experiences make you realize you're not the only one. Because at times with depression and certain things, you can feel like you're the only person going through something until you take that time to be in an environment of people who have been through it, they're out the other side, and they're able to share their story and journey with you. So my disclaimer with anything that I share, this is my knowledge, my wisdom, my life experience, and I'm sharing it in the hopes that it will resonate with other people and help them on their path. And maybe some of the things that I've done with my life are something that can be implemented to help you with the challenges you might face. This week's topic is all around addiction, substance abuse, recovery side of things, and we might jump into some plant medicine things and the evolution of where I've come from and where I'm at now. To start off, I mentioned this in episode 1. I grew up with high-functioning alcoholics. What is a high-functioning alcoholic? It's someone who holds down a job, has a career, they potentially have a mortgage and certain things, so they're part of society. So alcohol isn't destroying their life completely. But outside of being committed to work, basically every other hour of the day, every moment of life is structured around drinking. For me, growing up in that environment, there were challenges, letdowns, challenges with fighting in home and things between parents. But from my experience, at the age of 15, I would say that was the first time I actually had a full drinking session. My year 10 formal, I think we end up finding, an older gentleman to buy us alcohol at a liquor store, as you do when you're a kid. And then after our formal that night out in the streets, we're all drinking and first time being really exposed to drinking alcohol on a larger scale. Where that led my life in regards to alcohol consumption, by the age of 18, when I was legally of age to purchase alcohol, I started drinking every day. It was an everyday occurrence. And I'd really been doing that even prior to being 18, working as a tradesman. I started my trade when I was 15 years old and working with older tradies. Most first stops after work were to the bottle shop, and same thing with older generation. You're a young man growing up, welcome to the new world of underage drinking, and that influence that it's just culturally normal. Growing up in Australia, every event you go to, whether you go to a birthday, a barbecue, Christmas, everything is structured around some form of alcohol consumption. So heavy drinking at a very early age. At the age of 21, I was able to purchase my first home, and I actually started my first business in the electrical trade. At that stage, I had smoked marijuana a little bit, but it was mainly a drinker. At that time, one of my housemates was a daily marijuana smoker. My other housemate was a full-blown drunk alcoholic, and my house was like a halfway house for my friends. I actually started smoking weed a lot more, and then not long after moving into the house and all living together, I basically smoked marijuana from the moment my eyes opened to the moment I closed them, every day for about 3 years, while drinking occasionally through the week, and then on the weekends doing harder drugs like speed, ecstasy, MDMA. Over this 3-year period, I really lost my way mentally and emotionally. Trying to run a business, trying to pay a mortgage, and just being a full-blown substance user, addict type behavior. Over time, this really just wore me down to the point of some pretty dark depression, anxiety, and a lot of self-judgment in regards to where my life is going, what I'm doing with my life. And at that point, I rented out my house that I had at the time, moved up to the North Coast where my dad had recently built a property, and with the intention that I was going to get into the mining, oil and gas industry. Through that journey, I did make that opportunity. So that with that industry, it basically sees you working in different rosters. So you might work for 3 weeks on, then have a week off where you get to do what you want, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Throughout that period of time, once again, I was in an environment where there was high alcohol consumption, daily drinking after work. And these challenges really started to destroy me mentally. As I mentioned before, physical health has always been my grounding force. It's the thing that's really allowed me to have a quality of life and still be present today. But some of the things that alcohol, pushes you to do, really tests your ability for quality of life. Now, I've done some crazy stuff. I've written off many cars, drink driving with people in the car that could have caused death to friends, caused harm to myself. I've been on top of a van that I've tried to do a handstand on while moving, came off the front of it and been driven over. So not just is it killing us internally by consuming it, by some of the decisions and choices we make in that state, we're also jeopardizing our life as well. At the age of around 24, 25, I moved to London. And when I moved to London, I started using cocaine every day. Easy to get, cheap, and that became a daily habit. So then I became dependent on cocaine. Later in my 20s, I ended up living with a meth addict, a meth dealer, and daily I started consuming methamphetamine or ice or whatever other names it's known for. And throughout this period of time, it was that connection to physical movement that allowed me not to go too far down the rabbit hole. But emotionally and mentally, I was really struggling and pushing myself further and further into a place of discomfort and challenge. And I realized at the age of 31, I told this story in the first episode, that I really had this moment of clarity and this huge epiphany about life and my choices and decisions around substance and alcohol abuse, and that if I didn't make a change, these changes would slowly affect my life to the point where I wouldn't have a quality of life, I wouldn't have a life, or I definitely wouldn't be doing the things that I knew deep down I was capable of. What I've noticed though with addiction, so when we talk about addiction and using substances, from my own experience and my own test trials on myself, what I found is that a lot to do with addiction actually comes more so with the habit. And that is habitual use or habits around certain, what would you call them? Creature comforts, like things that remind you of doing them. So for an example, when I worked in the mining industry, I would come home from time off, and immediately by coming home, there was a couple of things I would generally set up. I would set up a dealer to meet me just outside the airport so that I could get some cocaine. I'd be doing lines in the car before driving an hour and a half north to get home. When I got home, the first thing I'd do would smoke weed, and then after that, I'd have beers with my dad. What I noticed when trying to remove myself from these environments and these choices and decisions is that immediately when I went back to the mining industry, back to these remote locations, I actually had no intentional feelings or urges to want to consume most of these substances. And what I realized over time is it wasn't just the addiction to the actual feeling of the drug or substance. It was actually more related to the environments that I was in that would actually trigger those feelings and responses of needing to use. And that comes down to a very important factor regarding your environments. So your environments can have a huge influential impact on who you are, the decisions you make, and what you do in those environments. And it doesn't have to be people, it can be just the energy of the environment, in the habits that you used to recall being in those environments. obviously people play a huge role in this influence as well. So this can play a massive factor on not your desire to actually use a substance to get high or to disconnect from a feeling or to basically explore this world of substance abuse and alcoholism. It's sometimes related to an internal feeling in physiology that shifts to an environment that you associate with using these substances in. And what I did when I wanted to make a serious change, I had to make serious choices. And these choices involved me really disconnecting from all forms of influence. And that meant for me that I made the choice at 31 to move across country from Sydney to Perth, which is equivalent to LA to New York City. And I had this intention and desire that I was going to create a whole new life and a whole new version of me. The version that I wanted to be, that didn't need to rely on some form of substance or alcohol to feel good, to reward myself, to push down emotions and trauma that I didn't want to deal with. I really decided that it was only me and my choice and my decisions that could really make the change in my life. And when we talk about change, I was at a seminar a couple of weeks ago, and the question was asked, can anybody change? And I was in a crowd of 12,000 people, and nearly everyone in that building said basically no. If someone doesn't want to change, then it's almost impossible for them to change. But the Tony Robbins, whose seminar was, he actually pushed back against everyone. He said, no, that's not actually correct. Everyone has a lever. Everyone has some sort of leverage that if you can find that leverage, anyone will change. If you can find enough leverage in pain or pleasure with someone that you can really hit that sweet spot where they'll stand up and decide that it's time to make a change, everyone can change. Because I used to live by the ideology that only the person within wanting to change can actually change, because if it's not there, then it's wasted time and energy trying to put that into someone from an external point of view. But with change and changing your environment, there must be a level of intention deep down that shows you want to change. And that lever for me was really a deep state of depression and struggle with my current life and my limited success in what I believed I was capable of from all facets of my life. What I believe I could physically do with my body, what education I believed I could intake, and what I could do with my life from a business point of view, from a relationship point of view. So this was extremely important for me, that the environment was taking me away from the influence, because when you're so heavily invested in those environments and you've created a persona around being a certain person within that environment, especially for your friends and family, one of the easiest ways is just to remove yourself from the environments of influence. So I did remove myself. I created a whole new structure around life, and I actually dived deep into self-isolation. And through self-isolation, I found another part of the psychology that really had a huge impact and effect on me. And that was a huge amount of depression and going through those feelings of loneliness. And the reason why this came on so strong is because as tribal beings, we are designed to be around people. And the struggle with depression, especially depression around addiction and drug use, is that you quite often go inward and you're not wanting to share your dramas or your challenges with other people. One, it could be for embarrassment. Two, it could be for not wanting to be burdensome on other people. But this challenge with depression is it encloses you into a box that there's no way out of. Because at that point, you're just stuck with your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And this can be a very, very damaging place. So changing your environment is one thing, but making sure that the physical environment that changes you is uplifting you to the next level of who you want to be and where you want to get to. And then outside of that, it's about the people you're going to surround yourself with. I avoided clubs and pubs and social scenes around drinking, and I found more holistic communities that were more into meditation and yoga and cold plunging and breath work, and people that in these environments quite often you found had similar struggles with some form of addiction. And addiction comes in many forms. It's not just through substance abuse or alcohol. You have gambling, porn, food. All these things trigger dopamine releases or a reward system that you feel you are deserving of. And so those things are something that it'll come down to your leverage. What is the leverage? And you've got to find what is that one thing that if you had a choice to make a better life and a better quality of your future, what is that one lever that's a non-negotiable? Is it your kids? Is it your own self-love and well-being of what you want? Is it for your mother or father, your friends? Or most importantly, and the most important person involved is you. How can you just sit back and succumb to the challenges of addiction and substance abuse when you have a quality of life and a future ahead of you that's only being limited by your choices and decisions? What I found through removing myself from these environments, though, and the world of influence of other people and the energy of the environments that created this level of influence, was that as soon as I was removed from it, it immediately took me out of this physiological connection, this energetic feeling of the need to induce or consume any sort of substance or alcohol. Now, when you're on the path to recovery, or you're looking to make changes, just because you decide in that moment that this decision and choice is going to change everything for the rest of your life, that decision and choice is only the first step of many steps to come, and there more than likely will be some stumbles and falls along the way. At the end of the day, we're only human, and with the way we're constructed, we can easily be influenced by our environment. So it's too easy to fall back into old habits. And that's why when you're creating new habits, you have to have this discipline, and you really need to have a strong plan in place for what it is you're wanting to get out of it, what boundaries you're going to put on people and places that you'll visit. Because if you don't have a strong structure, it's impossible to stick to those habits and continually move forward with those progressions. Now, habits are conscious decisions to do something inherently that you, for the most part, won't want to be doing. So this does create a huge amount of self-influence where you have to have that leverage point to really push yourself towards those goals, dreams, and aspirations you're working towards. So rather than living in the present moment of challenge, you have to have a visual interpretation and manifestation and belief in what you want in the future, and you have to tap into that feeling and bring it back to your present now, knowing that you may not be where you want to now, but you're only a choice and a decision and another step away from making your journey towards that end goal result. Now, with habits, there's a lot of research around how we can turn our habit, which is a conscious decision where we're forcing ourselves to do something, into a subconscious or autonomous habit where we're no longer having to put conscious thought and motivation into it. It's part of our discipline and our structure. Now, there was a research that I read that showed anywhere from 19 to 360 days in this trial with people creating new habits is the amount of time it took for someone to create a disciplined habit that went from conscious thought and motivation to becoming autonomous, with the average time frame around 66 days. So for me, I think with a lot of protocols and things that I put together for work and watching the body physiologically change through health challenges, it's around 12 weeks ideally, whether that's a fitness program, a diet program, we're putting you through a super healing protocol, regenerating the body at work. We want to see over 12 weeks of consistent use and discipline to that to really start to see some significant changes and to rewire your brain. Basically, we're taking new neurological or old neurological pathways and recreating new neurological pathways that are becoming autonomous to your day-to-day life. Now, if you take fitness training, for instance, you're out of shape physically. I think fitness training and even a lot of research shows how important that is for mental health, not just your physical health, if not even more important for mental health. A lot of research studies have actually shown that exercise and fitness far outweigh the benefits of breaking free from depression and mental health issues, far more than SSRIs or medications for ADHD like Adderall and things like that, because they're actually just suppressing the actual physiological change that shifts that brainwave activity, and then you just become dependent on using a drug to actually try and get the benefits out of a so-called mental health issue that's all within your physiology. If you can change your state, then you can change your environment. But to change your state, you have to change your physiology. Now, our brain is such a powerful thing that if we're going to set ourselves a task or an opportunity to build a new habit over that 12-week period, you have to be very diligent in regards to planning out those weeks and not allowing yourself not to show up. If you don't show up on the days that you're saying you're going to train and go to the gym, the moment you let yourself down is the moment that restarts again, because commitment and repetition is the key to implementing a new conscious motivational thought process that becomes subconscious or autonomous within the way we function. So when you're looking at that, you really want to plan out what it's going to look like. Now, when it comes to drug and alcohol abuse and addiction, the biggest thing you need to do is take yourself away from the environments of influence. If you can take yourself out of those influential environments, the people, the media, the places that you associate with those old habits, the easier it's going to make the task for you to break free from these demons and challenges that keep bringing you down. Now, along that path of recovery, it's very important not to beat yourself up. It's highly likely that you may stumble, you may fall, you may go back into some old habits, but you have to have that awareness and conscious thought around knowing the leverage point, because the leverage point is the thing that will prevent you from continuing to spiral down that path. It's like an autonomous switch that flicks in. So you've been clean, or you've been living a healthy life, you're in control of alcohol consumption or drug use on a recreational point of view, and you're not abusing or using on a daily basis. And then something comes up where you spend a weekend and you go into some old habits and challenges. What you have to do in those moments is understand the leverage point, and that should stop you from wanting to continue. And also not beating yourself up and understanding. As an example, I sat with a friend the other day. For a year, they gave up drinking, no alcohol consumption in a year. Something happened and they went on a 3-day bender. And speaking to them, they were at rock bottom. It was like they had just completely failed themselves and lost everything they'd worked so hard for. But I sat with this person and I reminded them that you just spent 365 days of commitment and discipline to what you chose to do, your choices and your decisions. And you did that. Now, are you going to choose 3 days of a bad decision when you're in my facility now trying to detox and make changes to get better? Are you going to take those 3 days and allow them to overpower the 365 days that you absolutely destroyed what you were going through? Like, you have to have that self-awareness of being kind to yourself, showing yourself self-love. We're all going to stumble, fall and fail at some stage, but how we get back up and fight for ourselves and our future and what we want is where the magic happens. And so it's very important along the path of recovery from addiction and substance abuse that if you do fall off, just jump straight back on, because there's a stop at every level, and for every level there's another devil. So you're going to find these challenges along the way, but just be mindful that if you can really find that, and I'll keep saying that leverage point, what does it mean to you to find that point of view and that thing that's going to shift and change your mindset every time that you're in a place of influence? For me, on my journey, I basically for 2 years went pretty clean and sober, not consuming anything. And then after I'd rebuilt myself and was really happy with who I was and had what I felt was full control, then I allowed myself to be social. So happy to have a glass of wine with dinner or have a beer with friends. But no longer was I in a pursuit of pushing the party boy image or pushing that destruction of myself through constant consumption. And my challenges when I was abusing and from using from an addictive point of view was it wasn't just one thing. It was a multitude of different things, either through one night or several days. And so I found ways to really manage that, and it was all about the leverage point. What's most important for my future and the dreams and goals that I desire. Most recently, it's been 7 months, I stopped drinking completely. At the point when I gave up, I had no daily consumption of alcohol or issues. I didn't drink much, more socially. But I realized that this one thing, because of my past and my growing up, was the one defining thing that I felt was actually causing me to not really get to the level that I believe I can get to for that sense of achievement. And it's been an easy journey because the choice and decision was straightforward this time. There was no second guessing it. There was no, oh, I need this to be able to interact and be social or have fun. What I got to was the leverage point was so far more important, and the pleasure from that far outweighed the pain. And that's the other thing we can touch on quickly before I finish up. So going to keep these to 30 minutes, these little podcasts. But we quite often use substance, food, alcohol, gambling, quite often to disconnect from feelings, emotions, and traumas that we may have faced throughout our life. The thing with trauma is that when you leave it inside, it festers and stirs, and it doesn't matter how much substance you use or how many things you try to utilize to ignore it and push it down, it's always going to show face and come back up. And so you need to find the power to sit with the right people, to sit with yourself, and really dive deep into understanding the things that make you make the decisions that you do, and the things that are ultimately sabotaging your present life and affecting your ability to have the quality of life in your future. Because when you cry, when you yell, when you do certain things, you're releasing emotion and you're releasing trauma from the tissue, you're releasing it from the cells. It's trapped within inside you. And no amount of alcohol, no amount of substance is ever going to push it out. This is an inside job where you have to find this deep connection to your soul and spirit so you can face it front on. You need to face it front on, and you need to find the love in the things that have happened to you. Because when you can love, forgive, and forget, that's when you ultimately release some of the deepest, darkest traumas that you'll ever face. Anyway, this has been 28 minutes of me chatting. Thanks for joining me for week 2. More about some of my path with addiction and recovery. I really appreciate everyone jumping on. We were live on Instagram today, so thanks for the people that were on. I think I've seen you on there, Jared, for the most part, and a few other people. So I appreciate you guys showing up for me, but also more importantly, showing up for yourselves. And thank you very much for the support. Enjoy the rest of your day. Next Monday we'll be on. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about until I get closer to that day. And we'll see where this journey takes us. Raw, honest, real. Peace, guys.